Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jody, and on my channel I talk about Broadway and books. And in today's video, I'll be giving a spoiler-free review on the latest book that I've read. So I'll talk a little bit on what the book is about, share my thoughts on the book, as well as my star rating. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's spoiler-free book review, and that would be for the book Trust by Hernan Diaz. So Trust is a book that is split up into 4 different parts, and each part is told from a different perspective on the same story. Trust is a story about money, power, greed, wealth, privilege, and how the truth can be twisted depending on who's telling the story. So that's basically what Trust is about. And I know that's a pretty vague overview on what the book is about, but this is a very hard book to talk about without giving anything away about, the story. So hence the vague overview. So this is the first book by Hernan Diaz that I've read so far, and after reading Trust and quite liking it, I would be interested in reading more from this author at some point in the future. So now for my thoughts on the book. So while I overall really liked this book, I didn't love everything about it. So now I'll get on to what I liked about the book, followed by what I didn't like about the book. So one of the things I really liked about this book that I found to be very interesting and unique was how the book was written, how the book was set up. So like I previously mentioned in my vague overview, Trust is a book that is split up into 4 different parts, where each part is told from a different perspective on the same story. Because there are 4 different perspectives being told in Trust, there are 4 different accounts of what happened and what didn't happen when it pertains to the story being told in the book. As you read from part 1 to part 2 to part 3 to part 4, the heart of the story remains the same within each part, but the details of the story start to change as you go from one part to the next, and what's true or not true also shifts as you go from one part to the next as well. Reading Trust is very much like reading 4 books within one book. Every part has a very different feel from one another, and not only does the writing style change from one part to the next, but how the story is told also changes from one part to the next as well. I found this to be a very interesting and engaging book to read. Reading Trust was really quite interesting because I've just never read a book quite like this one before. Another thing I really liked about the book was how the story took place over 100 years. I always really like and enjoy and gravitate towards stories that are told over a period of time, and we get to see how the world changes within that period of time that a book might take place in. And in Trust, the story is told over 100 years, and during that time we get to see how the world has changed, how technology has changed, how the environment has changed. But we also get to see at the same time how some things have ultimately remained the same throughout those years as well. An ongoing theme throughout Trust is how money is more than just paper, how great wealth can give someone so much power and so much privilege. And while some may use their wealth for good to try to make the world a better place, there are others who will ultimately go the opposite route of that and use all the power that they have and all the privilege that they have, for their own personal gain and what best suits them and only them. While I did really overall like this book, I didn't love everything about it. The one thing about this book I did not care for was part 2 of the book. I found this part of the book to be, if I'm being honest, just pretty boring. When reading this part of the book, I found, myself kind of just reading to get to the next part. I will say though, I do still recommend reading part 2 of this book if you're interested in reading the book, because this part of the book just ends up making so much more sense once you've read the whole book, and it just makes so much more sense, why this part of the book was the way it was, why it was written the way it was, why it felt so boring and cold and calculated. But you only get to that full understanding about part 2 if you read the whole book. So those are my thoughts on the book, both the good and the bad. Now for my star rating, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I'm definitely glad that I finally got around to reading this book and finally getting to see what all the hype around this book was about. Now for, is this a book I would recommend or not? While I did really like this book, I don't think it's one for everyone. I think if you're someone who really likes and appreciates and enjoys literary fiction or historical fiction, then I would totally recommend this book, to read. Otherwise, I would say this is probably just one to skip. And before I end today's video, I always like to point out whenever a book I'm reviewing on my channel has been or is going to be adapted. And so Trust has been picked up to be turned into a limited television series for HBO. Kate Winslet is set to star on the show, and as far as when the show is going to premiere on television, I have absolutely no idea about any of that. But I have to say, as someone who has now finally read this book, I am super excited about this adaptation. The story in this book just has a very big, has a very grand, has a very very epic feel to it. And I think if done well, Trust could just be absolutely amazing as a TV series. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Trust by Hernan Diaz. If you made it to this point of the video, I just want to say thank you so very much for taking the time to watch my spoiler-free review on Trust by Hernan Diaz. And I hope I helped you discover a new book today along the way as well. And until next time, bye.